I told myself it was just the rain. That the reason I stood there, watching her, was because the downpour was a solid sheet of water, and I was waiting for it to break. But the truth was, I'd been waiting for a break that had nothing to do with the weather for weeks. Elara was mid-40s. With laugh lines she tried to hide by smoothing her thumb over them when she thought no one was looking. She had a way of holding a wine glass, her fingers curled lightly around the stem, that made it look like an extension of her hand. And her voice. It was the kind of voice that could talk about inventory and shipping manifests, and still sound like it was sharing a secret. That night, after closing the small art supply shop we both worked at, we were the last two left. The storm had knocked the power out, plunging the back office into a deep, hushed blue. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long, distorted shadows. The frantic drumming of the rain on the roof was the only sound, a noise so loud it became a form of silence. "We could be here a while," she said, her voice softer than usual, muted by the storm. "I'm not in a rush." My own voice sounded too loud, too young. She was leaning against her desk, arms crossed. I was perched on the edge of the worn sofa, a few feet away. The space between us felt like a living thing. Every time one of us shifted, the old floorboards creaked, and the air would stir, carrying the faint scent of her perfume, jasmine and something sharper, like ozone. "You should be," she said, not looking at me. "At your age, there should be places to be. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." The words were out before I could stop them, hanging in the dim air between us, embarrassingly sincere. She went very still. Then she turned her head, and her eyes found mine in the half-light. They were dark, unreadable. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She just looked. It was a look that lasted too long, that saw too much. It was the kind of look you feel in your stomach. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered, the words almost swallowed by a clap of thunder. "Why not?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed off the desk and took a single step toward me. Then another. The space between us shrank from a chasm to a breath. She stopped just inches away, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her, close enough to see the pulse beating at the base of her throat. Her hand came up. For a heart-stopping second, I thought she was going to touch my face. But her fingers hesitated, then brushed a straight piece of lint from the shoulder of my shirt. It was a practical gesture, something a manager might do. But her touch was anything but practical. It was slow. Deliberate. The pads of her fingers were a brand through the thin cotton of my t-shirt, a point of searing heat in the cool, dark room. My breath caught. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears, a sound louder than the storm. Her eyes were still locked on mine, and in them, I saw a fracture in her usual composure, a raw, fleeting vulnerability that made my chest ache. Her lips parted as if to speak, to break the spell. And then, the sharp, electronic chirp of her phone, ringing from her purse on the desk, shattered the silence completely. Her hand froze on my shoulder. The moment snapped. Her eyes widened, the vulnerability vanishing, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. The spell was broken. Her hand, which had been a brand on my shoulder, snapped back to her side as if shocked. She turned away, a swift, fluid motion, and fumbled in her purse for the screaming phone. The screen lit up her face for a moment, a mask of strained calm. "Hello? Yes, I'm still here. The power's out." She listened, her back to me. "No, it's fine. I'll wait it out." A pause. "No, Daniel, don't, really, it's not necessary. The roads are terrible." Daniel. Her ex-husband. The name was a splash of cold water. I'd only seen him once, picking up their teenage daughter, a man in a sharp suit who looked like he'd never had a foolish thought in his life. The kind of man she was supposed to be with. She ended the call, the silence rushing back in, thicker and more awkward than before. She didn't turn around. "He worries," she said, her voice tight. "Thinks I can handle a little rain." "Can you?" I asked, the question softer than I intended. She finally turned, her composure carefully rebuilt, brick by brick. But I saw the cracks. I'd learned to see them. The way she'd smooth her skirt after a difficult customer, the slight tremor in her hand when she signed the payroll checks. She was a fortress, but I was starting to learn where the weak points were. I've handled worse, she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. It didn't reach her eyes. A failed marriage, a business on the brink, a blackout is the least of it. She was trying for lightness, but the admission hung in the air, raw and honest. It was the most she'd ever shared. I stood up, needing to close the distance she'd created. I stopped a foot away, close enough to see the faint silver threads in her dark hair. He's an idiot. She let out a breath, a small, surprised huff that wasn't quite a laugh. For worrying? For letting you go. Her eyes searched mine, and for a moment, the guard dropped completely. I saw the loneliness there, a deep, quiet well that echoed something in me. The age gap between us felt like a canyon in that moment, filled with all the things she'd lived and I hadn't. A marriage, a child, a divorce. All the reasons this was a terrible idea. She didn't step back. Instead, her hand came up again, but this time, it wasn't to brush away lint. Her fingertips gently traced the line of the wet seam on my t-shirt, from my shoulder down to my elbow. A shiver raced through me, entirely out of my control. Her touch was a whisper, a question. Your shirt is still damp from when you ran to lock the front, she murmured, her voice low. Her breath brushed against my collarbone, a warm caress in the cool, dark room. You'll catch a cold. It was a practical concern, a manager's worry. But the way her fingers lingered on my arm, the way her eyes held mine in the dim light, said something else entirely. The air between us crackled, charged with everything we weren't saying, every reason we shouldn't, and the one, undeniable reason we might. And for a long, suspended moment, neither of us moved. The sound of a key scraping in the front door lock was like a gunshot. We sprang apart. Elara took 2 quick steps back, her hand flying to her throat. I turned toward the window, pretending to watch the rain, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure the whole room could hear it. Hello? Elara? You in here? It was Marcus, the owner. His heavy footsteps echoed in the empty shop. Back here, Marcus! Elara's voice was impressively steady, a polished, professional tone she'd conjured from nowhere. The power's out. Marcus lumbered into the office doorway, a bulky silhouette holding a massive flashlight. The beams swept over us, blinding. Saw the light from your phone. Wanted to make sure you two weren't stranded. Everything okay? Fine, we said in unison. The word hung in the air, too quick, too sharp. Marcus's beam lingered on me for a beat too long. Jake. Didn't expect you to still be here. Helping clean up. I mumbled, the lie tasting thin. Right. He swung the light back to Elara. Generators kicked on in the back. Lights should be back in a minute. You kids get home safe. He gave a gruff nod and retreated, his footsteps fading. The moment the front door clicked shut, the fragile professionalism shattered. The office lights flickered on with a low hum, harsh and unforgiving after the intimate dark. Elara looked exposed. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide. She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture I'd come to recognize. That was, she began, then shook her head. Close, I finished for her. She met my gaze, and the fear in her eyes was now mixed with something else, a reckless, desperate heat. The interruption hadn't broken the tension, it had supercharged it. The space between us was a live wire. This is a bad idea, she whispered, but she was walking toward me again, each step a contradiction. I know. People will talk. They'll say things. I don't care. You should. She was right in front of me now. I'm your boss. I'm old enough to be. She couldn't finish the sentence. Her gaze dropped to my lips. My own breath hitched. I could see the pulse racing in her neck, a frantic rhythm that matched my own. I lifted my hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. My fingertips brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it behind her ear. Her eyes fluttered closed at the contact, a soft, surrendering sound escaping her lips. Her head tilted up. Mine tilted down. The space between our mouths was a breath, a promise, a line we were about to cross. I could feel the warmth of her, smell the rain and jasmine on her skin. And then her eyes snapped open, filled with a fresh wave of panic. But she didn't pull back. Instead, her hands came up and fisted in the front of my damp shirt, not pushing me away, but holding me there, anchored to the precipice. We were frozen, a hair's breadth from a kiss, caught between the ruin of a mistake and the terrifying hope of something real. The air left my lungs. Her fists clenched in my shirt were an anchor and a tether, pulling me into a gravity I couldn't escape. The why not and the we can't and the what will people say evaporated in the white-hot space between our mouths. It would be so easy to ruin this, she breathed, the words a confession against my lips. Her eyes were wide, not with panic now, but with a terrifying clarity. To ruin us. Elara, I whispered, my voice rough. My hand, still cupping her jaw, slid into her hair. It was as soft as I'd imagined. It was ruined the moment I walked in here. A shudder ran through her. Her grip on my shirt tightened, the fabric straining. She was leaning into me now, her body a soft, yielding line against mine. I could feel the frantic beat of her heart, or maybe it was mine, a wild, syncopated rhythm in the humming silence of the office. I'm twice your age, she murmured, but it was a weak protest, a final, fading echo of an argument she no longer believed in. Her eyes searched mine, looking for a doubt, a hesitation she could mirror. I don't care. My thumb stroked the delicate skin just below her ear. I don't see a number. I just see you. Her breath hitched. She closed her eyes, a long, slow blink of surrender. Her head tilted back just a fraction more, an unspoken invitation. The last barrier was crumbling. I could feel the warmth of her breath mingling with mine, a shared shaky rhythm. The scent of her, jasmine, and the clean, rain-damp smell of her skin, was all I could process. The world had shrunk to this single, charged point of contact. My other hand found the small of her back, pressing her closer until not a sliver of light could pass between us. I lowered my head, my lips a whisper away from hers. I could already feel the phantom touch, the electric potential of it. Tell me to stop, I breathed, my words a low vibration against her mouth. My last, desperate attempt at chivalry. My final offering of an escape route. Her eyes opened. They were dark, deep pools of want and fear and a heartbreaking kind of hope. She didn't tell me to stop. Instead, her grip loosened in my shirt, one hand sliding up to cradle the back of my neck, her fingers tangling in my hair. The touch was decisive, final. Just, she started, her voice a raw, broken whisper. And then the sharp, insistent buzz of the shop's landline on the desk next to us shattered the moment for the second time that night. The phone screamed into the silence, a shrill, mechanical intruder. We didn't jump apart this time. We simply froze. The spell didn't break, it curdled. On the fourth ring, the answering machine clicked on. Elara's recorded voice, bright and efficient, filled the room. You've reached the artist's nook. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message after the tone. A beep. Then, a young, feminine voice, laced with teenage exasperation. Mom? Pick up. Dad said the power was out and you were stuck with, and I quote, that kid who works for you. A dramatic sigh. Just call me when you get this. And don't let him drive you home, it's weird. Love you. Bye. Click. The silence that followed was a physical weight. That kid. Elara's hand, which had been cradling my neck, went stiff. She slowly, carefully, pulled it away as if my skin had burned her. She took a single step back, and the space between us turned arctic. I felt the words like a slap. Not from the daughter, she was just a kid, but from the reality they represented. I wasn't a man in this moment. I was that kid. A problem to be managed. An embarrassment. Elara's face was a mask of shame. She wouldn't look at me. She stared at the phone as if it had betrayed her deepest secret. She didn't mean it like that. She finally whispered, her voice hollow. But she's not wrong, is she? The words came out flat. That's what everyone will see. That's what you see when you remember who you're supposed to be. Her eyes snapped to mine, wide with a new kind of panic. Don't put words in my mouth. Then tell me what words to use, Elara. The force in my voice surprised us both. I ran a hand through my hair, my whole body trembling with the adrenaline of a crash that hadn't happened. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're ashamed of me. She flinched as if I'd struck her. It's not shame. It's. She hugged herself, her knuckles white. It's the fact that my daughter, my ex-husband, everyone, they would only see the wrong thing. They wouldn't see you. They'd see a mistake. And what do you see? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. She was silent for a long time, her chest rising and falling in shallow, unsteady breaths. The air was thick with everything we'd almost done and everything that had just stopped us. Then she moved. Not away, but closer. She stepped into my space again, her body brushing against mine in the narrow gap between the desk and the sofa. Her hand came up, but instead of touching my face, her fingers gently, hesitantly, traced the line of my clenched jaw. I see a man, she said, her voice so quiet I felt the words more than heard them. And I'm terrified of what that means. Her touch was an apology and a confession. It was also a decision. The fear was still there, a wild thing in her eyes, but it was now secondary to the truth hanging between us. She was choosing to be terrified with me. The word hung between us. Terrified. It wasn't a rejection. It was the most honest thing she had ever given me. Her admission seemed to drain the last of her resistance. The hand on my jaw trembled, but it didn't pull away. I'm tired of being the responsible one, she whispered, her breath a warm caress against my skin. The ex-wife. The manager. The mother who has to have all the answers. Her other hand came up, fisting lightly in my shirt again, not to push, but to hold on. For 1 minute, I just want to be a woman. Standing too close to a man who looks at me like I'm the only thing in the room. The raw need in her voice undid me. This was the core of her, stripped of all her defenses. I do, I murmured, my voice thick. My hands found her hips, anchoring her to me. You are. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rain and her perfume and the sharp, clean smell of our shared fear. The hum of the fluorescent lights was a drone in my ears, a stark contrast to the frantic beat of my heart. We were a breath apart, our bodies aligned, every point of contact. Her hands on my chest, my grip on her hips, sending currents of electricity through me. Tell me what you want, Elara. It was barely a sound. Her eyes, dark and bottomless, held mine. The war was over. Surrender was in their depths. You, she breathed. I want you. It was the permission I needed, the final thread snapping. I didn't crash into her. I closed the infinitesimal distance with a slow, deliberate certainty that felt more profound than any frantic passion. My lips met hers. It wasn't an explosion. It was a homecoming. Her mouth was soft, yielding, then desperate, answering the pressure of mine with a hunger that mirrored my own. A small, broken sound escaped her throat, and her arms slid around my neck, pulling me closer, her body melting against mine. My hands slid from her hips to the small of her back, pressing her into me until there was no space left, until I could feel the frantic rhythm of her heart against my chest. It was messy, and raw, and human. Her tears, silent and warm, mixed with the taste of her. It was a kiss filled with months of longing, weeks of stolen glances, and the terrifying, glorious weight of a line being crossed forever. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, we didn't go far. Our foreheads rested together, our breaths mingling in ragged, shared rhythm. The world had shifted on its axis. The office, the storm, the phone call, it all belonged to a different lifetime. She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her lips swollen, her composure utterly shattered. and she had never looked more beautiful. "Okay," she whispered, the word a shaky exhale. "A statement. A confession. A promise." "Okay," I echoed. We stood there, holding each other in the harsh fluorescent light, two people who had finally stopped lying to themselves. The consequences were a problem for tomorrow. For now, there was only this. We didn't speak. Words felt too clumsy, too small for the chasm we had just crossed. Instead, I took her hand, lacing my fingers through hers. Her grip was firm, real, her palm warm against mine. She looked down at our joined hands, a faint, wondering smile touching her lips. "So this is it," she said, her voice hushed. "The point of no return." "It always was," I replied. "We were just slow to catch up." I led her to the worn sofa, and we sat, not on opposite ends as we used to, but close enough for our thighs to press together. The storm had softened into a gentle, persistent rain, a quiet soundtrack to our new reality. She leaned her head against my shoulder, a simple act that felt more intimate than the kiss. The weight of her, the trust in the gesture, made my throat tighten. "I'm still scared," she admitted into the quiet, her words a vibration against my arm. "I know. Me too. But not enough to stop." "No," I said, my voice firm. "Not enough to stop." I lifted my hand and gently brushed the hair from her forehead, my fingers tracing the lines she was always so conscious of. She didn't stiffen or pull away. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch with a soft sigh. In that moment, the age gap didn't feel like a canyon. It felt like a detail, as irrelevant as the color of the sofa we sat on. She wasn't an older woman and I wasn't a younger man. We were just two people, stripped bare of our defenses, finding a quiet harbor in each other. "What happens on Monday?" she asked, the practical manager in her surfacing for a moment. "On Monday," I said, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. "We figure it out. Together." She nodded, a slow, accepting movement. Then she tilted her head up, and her eyes met mine. The fear was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a dawning, steady warmth. A sense of rightness. We sat like that for a long time, her head on my shoulder, my arm around her, listening to the rain wash the old world away. The future was a complicated, uncertain thing, but for the first time, it was a future we would face side by side. It wasn't a perfect, storybook ending. It was messy, and real, and ours. And it was just the beginning. Did you feel the chemistry between Elara and Jake? What kind of romantic stories would you like to hear next? Let us know in the comments below.